Hello INTJ and friends, and welcome back to another video. In today's video I'd like to talk a little bit about communication, how INTJs communicate, and how we can communicate a bit better with other people. So let's get right in. So to start off the video, I'd like to discuss the actual communication methods, or the way an INTJ does actually communicate. And being introverted intuition dominant function and supportive extroverted thinking function, they tend to be quite practical in the way they communicate with other people. They will say things generally how they think they are and how they maybe should be, so they can be, or they have a tendency to be quite blunt about things. This is obviously not true in all the cases, because I think having a stereotype of being somewhat robotic is not necessarily true, because a lot of the time a developed INTJ will know, social modicum and how to conduct themselves in a social situation, although they might have the tendency to be a bit forward with the way they say things and with the way they communicate with other people. So if we were to summarize it, it's obviously quite a blunt and straightforward way of communicating. Now this works very well, it being a strength in certain situations, which we'll get into right now. So the strength, I would say, of the INTJ's communication style works very well in a business environment, in my opinion, because a lot of the times you just want to get down to the point. So if you're in a business meeting, don't forego the formality of the introduction and all that, but it can be very valuable in planning or just general discussion about strategy and business development. And a lot of the times, this is the kind of things that would be valued during a business meeting. Maybe not so much in an emotional discussion, which I'll get into a bit later. But yeah, so the strength essentially is the way they use their extroverted thinking and their introvert intuition means that it can be very good to move business meetings forward, to move projects forward, and to move essentially their own life forward. And if it's communicated in the right environment, very valuable. In fact, I think the INTJ might be one of the best consultants, especially for technical businesses, because of this communication style. So they'd be very good at managing, or rather consulting on managing techniques and managing styles. So if you're looking to do a career in that, I highly advise it. In fact, I did make a video about INTJ careers, which you can watch. I'll maybe link it in the description below. So what are the weaknesses then, if that's their strength? Well, having blind spot FE. Now, I won't go into too much detail what blind spot is, but essentially there's 8 cognitive functions. INTJ and all the other letterings, mostly, if you watch any sort of video, they'll mostly discuss the first 4 functions. For the INTJ, it would be introverted intuition, extroverted thinking, 3rd function, introverted feeling, and 4th function, extroverted sensing. The 4th function is the weakest function, or the one that needs to be developed a bit more, let's put it that way. Now, it goes deeper into all the 8 functions, because in total is 8 cognitive functions. And I can't remember which one it is, but one of them is known as the blind spot function. And essentially this is, as the name suggests, a function which we're blind to. Every other personality type has their own one. But for the INTJ, it is extroverted feeling. And I think this is one of the reasons, or one of the weaknesses in their communication, is that having blind spot extroverted feeling means they don't tend to recognize other people's emotions that well. Now, being an intuitive or introverted intuition means they can make very accurate assumptions based on their own internal perceptions of the world. So you can understand how someone might react given certain patterns that you see in an environment. So you could also be able to foretell certain things using this introvert intuition, and it might be right, let's say 50% of the time, which is obviously very good. And you can also sort of tune into how a situation could unfold. Now, this is good forecasting and prediction and what have you, even analysis in that sense, because you can be very good at understanding these patterns. But having blind spot extroverted feeling means that you can tend to walk over people's emotions in your brutal precision in your speech. And it can seem like you're steamrolling a conversation because you don't take into account this blind spot function. And this obviously is a very dangerous waters when trying to communicate with a feeling type. I myself am about to get married to an ENFP, so I understand that they're apparently a very good combination, which I would tend to agree with, just from my own personal experience. But in conversation, this blind spot FE can manifest in a very damaging way. It can lead to arguments and what have you. And I think the weakness here being you can tend to be too brutal in the way you hammer a point in. Being introvert intuition dominant, you might, as a downfall of such a dominant function, is that you can tend to feel like you're always right about things because you have been in the past. Now, clearly this is not true, because if past behavior always predicted future behavior, you'd be a stock exchange millionaire, and that's not true. But it does help in a lot of other situations, maybe not so much in communication when it is in conjunction with this blind spot FE. So this is one of the weaknesses, that having also the extroverted thinking. Sorry, I'm going to be on a tangent here. Having the extroverted thinking also means that you can make very logical assumptions about things, and in an environment where that's not needed, coupled with this blind spot extrovert feeling, it means you can really hammer in points. And I think this is a big weakness, especially when you can't read the situation or the conversation that well. I'll give you an example of this. Having these two functions, IN and TE, means that you can be very good at problem solving, and your solutions to things are what you believe is the right caring attitude. And for a feeling type, this might not be the case a lot of the time, because they might just want to explore their own emotions and their own feelings. For example, an INFP, I think, is very mature in their internal feeling world, so they can deal with those emotions. They just like to have a board to bounce off. And sometimes as an INTJ, and maybe an INTP as well, but that's a different function altogether, they'll look at it as a way of trying to fix that person's problem when it's not necessarily a problem sometimes. And this can come across as insensitive or rude. And this is mostly due to this blind spot FE, because you can't recognize those emotions in another person, and you only think of it as a sort of rational solution to what their problem might be. So essentially, let's say the internal megalomania of introverted intuition, and the precise and brutal approach to the way you dissect things in your own internal world might manifest as coming across as insensitive. And this can be a great weakness in the correct situation, but it can also be a great strength in the right situation. So you really have to be able to read that. And that's easier said than done, right? So how can we rectify these weaknesses and strengths? Well, I guess the strengths don't really need rectification. It's maybe more about leveraging them in the right situation. But for the weakness part, I think don't get too hung up on the fact that you can't read people's emotions that well, or let's say on a personal level, but on a macro level you can read people's emotions, given there's enough people in the environment. But if you want to work on this, then I would suggest speaking openly about it to someone, specifically a feeler type, because they'll be able to help you hone those skills. Again, the INTJ is not, let's say, famous for opening up almost at all. And I know this is one from personal experience. It did take a long time for me to ever do that with people in general. but I ended up finding someone who I could do it with, so it was very beneficial to me in terms of being able to read those emotions better in others. So if you do have a person like that, then I seriously recommend that you at least speak to them about it and see how you can use that as a barometer in later on situations. So that would be my suggestion there. But again, sometimes it doesn't. You don't need to, because fundamentally you might be the right tool for the right job at the right time, and you should just leverage those strengths rather. So I think that's all we have today, and I hope you learn to communicate better and use your strengths. Thank you very much. What is it?
Are you finished?
Yes.